everyone, through defense mechanisms or programming or whatever, trauma when they were a kid or whatever, they start to develop all these stories to help them survive, to make sense of whatever's going on in this world. And the more stories that they tell to themselves, to like as a survival mechanism, like you start to build up all these stories and you start to become further and further away. You start to stray and drift further away from the truth. And what she says is like the amount of space that you deviate or you stray from the truth, that space is your capacity for suffering.
Okay, welcome back to the Performance Through Health podcast with me, Martin McPhillamy. Today I have Brian Lay, and aka Primal Breathwork. I think that's his business name. Is also go and find him on social media, Instagram mainly. Now, I wanted to chat with Brian today because he has been trained by Wim Hof himself, Patrick McKeown, Dan Brulé, Kasper Van Der Muelen. Even is it the freediver Stig that you've even been trained by, or you've been to visit him?
Yeah, I did a few things with him as well. That's pretty cool.
So you have been to probably all the big characters in the field of breathwork, and you've really seems like you've expanded your knowledge across a broad horizon and context of different modalities of breathwork. So I'm excited to have a chat with you today. But I thought we'd just start with what got you into breathwork, and where's your journey started with that?
In breathwork, I have like a short version and a really long version, but I'll try to kind of fit in between. For me, for breathwork, I could probably pinpoint. I mean, it's kind of this thing that's in hindsight, I've had a lot of health issues growing up. So in hindsight, being a breathwork coach, I realized like breathing or lack of proper breathing has been a big issue in my whole life. So in hindsight, it's been a huge part of my life. But in terms of how I started getting into breath work was probably around, it was during a kind of just a low period of my life, going through a bit of probably kind of, I would say, depression, anxiety, that kind of stuff. And that was around, I think, 2015. So I was just going through a really rough time in my life at that point. My relationship, my career, and a whole bunch of other different things were just crashing down. And it just kind of hit this point where I just wasn't feeling good. My health was off. My mental health was definitely off. And I didn't know what was going on. I just kind of felt really low. And one day I found, I kind of had this epiphany. It was actually after some mushrooms, a mushroom trip. And how that kind of opens everything up.
Yep.
And so that definitely opened up some things in me. And I remember one day I was just I was in Australia back then. I was in Hong Kong and went back to Australia for a bit. And I just had this kind of moment where it kind of became clear that a lot of suffering that was happening in my life at the time was an internal thing. And I was projecting and blaming on everything externally, but for some reason, this mushroom trip kind of internalized everything and turned it inwards and made me realize that I can't really control anything outside of me. Maybe I can do something different, like within. And that's when I kind of booked into Vipassana, the 10-day silent, 12-day silent retreat kind of thing.
So you went straight in hard. You went straight in hard.
Yeah, I'm kind of that kind of person. Like, I don't know what to sign up for. I go into the deep end and then I kind of learn, or I sink or swim kind of thing. And that absolutely changed my life in terms of, I didn't even know what meditation was. I mean, I heard about it, and for years I was like, yeah, it's probably something I should do. But then when you actually go there, and I did in Australia in the Blue Mountains, and completely changed my whole mindset about everything. That you are not your thoughts, you are the observer behind the thoughts, and just all those kind of things that you learn, impermanence and all that kind of stuff. And when you're kind of just going on autopilot in your life, you're not aware of any of this stuff. And when this opens up, it's like you didn't know anything before that. And I don't know if you've done Vipassana before, but they give you this kind of pretty strict kind of routine to follow where during the 10 days, you're meditating for about 10 hours a day. And then After that, it's 2 hours a day, every day, on your own once you get out of it, which, it's not that practical, to be honest, for a lot of people, especially in people in Hong Kong. Even just going to half an hour class for a lot of people is quite challenging. So let alone 2 hours. So gradually my practice started to go down. And then that's when a year later I found Wim Hof. And it's funny because I was also after another mushroom trip. And I was just like watching random YouTube videos of my mates after it. And that Vice documentary just played randomly and popped up. And we were watching it, but it just kind of like everything that Wim was talking about, it kind of spoke to me because I grew up always getting sick. I grew up, not very confident. I grew up like just with a poor immune system and allergies and everything. My breathing was always off. Everything you spoke about, I was like, that's what I need. That's what I need in my life. And I next, like literally after that Vice documentary, I Googled him to see how I can learn from him. And I think he was already booked out. This before he was really popular, but he was already booked out for like a year or something over in Europe. It was a long wait list. And then it just so happens a week later, he launches his first Australia retreat camp, and I signed up for that one, and I think it was 2016, sorry. And that's kind of my journey of where I started breathwork. Okay. It's through Vipassana meditation led me to Wim Hof, and that once again just completely blew my mind with the whole breathing thing. Yeah. Let alone not even Iceland, that's another crazy thing. And just from there, I went back to Hong Kong after getting certified, and I have this massive fear of public speaking, and that's probably one of my biggest fears I've ever had in my life. So when I got back to Hong Kong, I've been certified, but all that fear and all that insecurity started to creep in because it's a city of like 7-8 million people, and there was really no one teaching breathwork there, which is surprising, because a lot of breath comes from the East.
That was one of the next questions I was going to ask: is there in Hong Kong, being like, China has a very traditional ancient culture where there's a lot of traditional medicines and things like that. But I've never really heard of there being I know there's qi, there's energy, there's talking about, but is there a breath work or a breathing background in their culture at all?
There is in Chinese culture for sure. I think if you read James Ness's book, there's like 7 books in the Taoist kind of side, all on breathing. So like Qigong and Qi, a lot of it has got a lot to do with breath. So there's definitely kind of a background of that, like in the background, but it's really been lost, just like in the West, it's been completely lost to the newer generations. Yeah, like even like my parents' generation, they have no clue about any of this stuff. They're aware of things like Qigong and stuff, but not many people practice it. You still get the elderly in Hong Kong and China, they still practice things like Tai Chi and stuff, which definitely incorporates elements of breath in it. So there is definitely an element of it, but just the masses, it's completely like no one knows about it. No one really does it. So it was something that was surprising to me. And I actually didn't want to teach. It's kind of more happened by situation in terms of like, there was no one teaching at the time. I think there was maybe one guy teaching holotropic, like really small, like niche kind of groups. Other than that, there was no one really bringing it to the masses over there, like demystifying it and just kind of bring it out in practical kind of way. And eventually I started doing like one workshop here, one workshop there, just as a little side thing to kind of give back. And then before I knew it, like my first workshop sold out, second, third, and it just kept having all this demand, and it just snowballed. And it was just nothing I expected. Like, because I have my own business, my own work that I was doing, and breathing was just going to be something I do maybe once a month, once every couple of weeks, just to give back to the community. But 4 or 5 years later now, and it's taking up the majority of my time. And as you mentioned, like I've gone like, when you learn like breathwork originally, you learn like a lot of people get exposed to Wim Hof. But after you learn the whole Wim Hof thing, you realize that Wim Hof is simply one style of breathwork. And there's so many different styles of breathwork out there. And And that's why I started learning with all these other different teachers, because even though Wim was like an absolute game changer for me, I realized that as great as it is, it's not for everyone. And it's not for every every scenario. So there's all these different tools basically. And the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know, like the less I know basically.
I think the word you saying, demystifying things and understanding them as a practical tool, and knowing kind of what they're doing physiologically, but also how people can respond to them and how to figure out whether they're responding to them is a key element of breath work that people, when they're first learning, perhaps don't realize, is that because everyone is so different. Yeah. Everyone is also physiologically the same. So you have to kind of like know the background to go, okay, well, actually, I'm going to try this one first. Like for me, for example, if someone had high anxiety and had issues with mouth breathing already, I probably wouldn't go, okay, let's go and do some Wim Hof breathing, because like to start off with, it physiologically, scientifically, it doesn't look like it's going to be right. Yet you might go 8 weeks down of nasal breathing and then go, actually try Wim Hof, and they get more from that, and all of a sudden you realize that actually no, you can actually do Wim Hof, but you need to go, you've had to change your style of breathing first to get the benefits from that. So I think what you're doing by expanding your knowledge and going to different people is allowing you to have a greater capacity with your tool set.
Yeah, 100%. And I kind of I'm quite into, I mean, I love fighting myself. Watching MMA, UFC. So I kind of see the breathwork thing as MMA, and there's all these different styles under it. And if you just have one particular style, it might work for a certain amount of time with a certain amount of people. But, eventually you're not going to have the tools to deal or help with like all the issues that come to you from clients and yourself. So, there are all these different tools that all kind of lead you to the same thing. Try to get you back to that, that homeostasis, that optimal kind of state. As you said, different tools work with different people. And I think, like what you said, the Wim Hof method and, things like rebirth and holotropic, I feel like they're very powerful techniques. They're very, very powerful. And a lot of people dive, like for me, I dived into that side of things first. And you kind of, like what you said, you forget the basics. And you forget like the training wheels, the fundamentals of everything, and just simple things like, I remember when I started learning from Wim, it was kind of before it was very structured the way it is now. And it was just kind of Wim, just winging it. They never talked about nasal breathing. Yeah. It was all, the Tumo and the Wim Hof method and all that kind of stuff, the cold. And, I had no clue about nasal breathing. And when I started teaching, I remember I started teaching like box breathing to clients. And I didn't know the difference between nose breathing and mouth breathing back then. So I would get people to do box breathing through the mouth at the very, very beginning. And I started realizing like I was very lacking in a lot of other different things in breath work. It's kind of opened a lot of things up to me. And now I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say, isn't it interesting that I guess energetically you chose to do something because it felt right. It was like more of an intuition kind of thing that was calling you, and that energy has been pushed into something that's profound for you now, where it's become a part of your life. We didn't expect it. You hear that often. Joe Rogan talks about his podcast where he was just doing it because he enjoyed it and he just got called to it and wanted to have chats, and now he's got 15 million people tuning in. Like, I think people miss that call to adventure. They often block themselves out of it and don't go with what the universe is telling them to do.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm going through that right now. I'm not being able to go back to Hong Kong, and I'm kind of just floating around right now in Australia. And it's kind of all these lessons are just teaching me just to let go, all my stuff, everything's still in Hong Kong and I'm still paying rent every month. I wasn't expecting to be stuck like this, but it's just this lesson of just letting go and just go with the flow. And when you kind of realize because when you're in flow, you obviously know this, when you're in flow, you're not in a tense state, you're in a relaxed kind of state. And like the universe or whatever you want to call it, it just has this kind of flow. And when you really just let go and go along with it, it takes you to some places and some experience in your life that you definitely don't expect. Like I didn't even know what breathwork was like 7 years ago, 8 years ago. I didn't even know it existed, like let alone be an instructor in it now.
To be honest with you, I was working as a respiratory scientist for 10 years, and it was only 4 or 5 years ago that I even came across, Wim Hof and the likes of Patrick McKeown and stuff like that. Like it's not in the medical field. It's like we're looking at the lungs, we're looking at disease, we're looking at physiology, we're looking at what smoking does or cancers and things like that, but we're not actually looking what breathing does to people. And as I personally discovered it just like you, going through my own personal troubles and having not realizing that growing up I was a really anxious individual, but that was like a baseline for me. Just in my mind, I was always talking to myself. I always had like a song going through my head to blank out my thoughts, I guess, like my critical self-talk. I'd always be singing in my mind. But it wasn't until I started practicing yoga and slowed my breathing down, really to the point where I was like 10 seconds in, 10 seconds out, that I all of a sudden I was like, what is this up here? What's going on? Like what? And it's like all of a sudden there was like an observer effect of, wow, there's a lot going through my head at the moment. And that was for me, again, it was looking at the internal journey that changed the narrative of me being always exteroceptive, outwards looking, to interoceptive, and looking inwards, introspective even, sorry. And that was a game changer. And similarly with you, I think the psychedelics do help that, whether that be through a bad trip or a positive trip. It is basically showing you your internal state of affairs, but widen the bandwidth, so you're flooded with a lot more information than you could usually take.
Yeah, 100%. I think things like psychedelics and breath work and or certain breath work types, like it kind of allows you that space where you break out of patterns, or you just get to step outside those loops and patterns or conditioning program that you've grown up with. And just for those few hours or for that experience, or for that moment, you get a glimpse into what it would be like without it. And I think for a lot of people, that experience alone it's enough to give them like hope that there is something else out there, and also that there is something else out there. Because like you, before I even came across, like when I came across the meditation and stuff, and I realized that I didn't realize my mind was so busy. And when I realized that you can separate your thoughts to, your consciousness, that I'm like, how did I live for the first like 20 something years of my life? It was just like, I went to Vipassana, and the first 2-3 days alone, they focus you like to kind of like to observe your thoughts. And at the beginning, I remember the first day or two, I would be thinking for 10 minutes, 15 minutes before I realized I was actually thinking.
Oh, wow.
And then but then, day 2, day 3, you start to pull it back to 2 minutes, 1 minute, and you become more present. But then you realize, like, for most of my life, first 20 something years of my life, I was just in autopilot. It's like, it's like being in the matrix, asleep in the matrix.
So, interesting story. So when I broke up with my ex-partner, I had like quite a bit of social anxiety, and I was a bit kind of like, this is not really me. I'm usually pretty confident. I don't mind going, extroverted individual, don't mind chatting to people, but I'm a bit concerned about going out at the moment. So I used the concept of, if you've got a fear, just face it full on. You'll find the gold at the end of the deepest, darkest tunnel, like what Joseph Campbell says. And I went, what is the thing that's going to challenge me the most in terms of social anxiety and looking a fool sort of thing? So I went and did comedy improv classes. And during that, I realized that improv is probably one of the best things that you can learn, to have to be present in a conversation with someone, because you can't, if say, for example, if you're playing a game where you've got to create a story as a group of 10 people, an individual starts the story, the next person has to continue the story. You can't preload that story by your thoughts in your mind. You've got to be truly present listening to know how the story is going along. And one day after I'd finished the course, I went around to my friend's house for dinner, and I said, look, I've been doing improv, and his wife was really curious to know what I've been up to. And I was like, well, we can play a game if you want. It's like me and you are just going to make a story on the spot now. I'm just going to, off the top of my mind, just come up with anything that I want to say. Don't worry, you don't need to be embarrassed. You just got to continue the story. So I gave my spiel, and then all of a sudden she said something that was completely irrelevant to what I'd said. And I stopped there and I said, did you have your thoughts in your head before I even spoke? Were you actually listening to what I said? Were you present with me? Can you even remember what the story I was told? And she was like, no, I just made a story up in my head. I was like, how often do you do that? And she said, a lot. And I was like, how often in a conversation are you actually listening to what the person is saying, or are you judging what they think they're saying in the story in your mind? And she said, I think all the time. And it turns out that she went to see a psychiatrist and she had some serious mental health issues. And that was that moment there was realizing that she is never present in her life, and that she's always living by the story that she's projecting onto someone or into people in the world. And I was like, that is a defining moment when you realize that you or someone else is not present, and you're not actually you're not living truth, you're not living in the world. It's pretty insane when you have those spur of the moment things. Like for some people it can cause realize that you've got mental health issues. For other people it's like, wow, it's a breakthrough and it's a relief. But there's an aspect to it which is, I guess you could call the awakening.
Yeah, 100%. Do you know Byron Katie? Have you heard of that author?
No, I haven't actually.
She has this thing for the 4 questions where basically it's a process of self-inquiry. And what I was bringing this up is that what she talks about is like there's a truth, and there's only one truth, and that's what you're implying is like the present moment. That's the truth. Mm-hmm. And everyone, through defense mechanisms or programming or whatever, trauma when they were a kid or whatever, they start to develop all these stories to help them survive, to make sense of whatever's going on in this world. And the more stories that they tell to themselves, to like as a survival mechanism, like you start to build up all these stories and you start to become further and further away. You start to stray and drift further away from the truth. And what she says is like the amount of space that you deviate or you stray from the truth, that space is your capacity for suffering. Isn't that how much you can suffer? Yeah. And this process of self-inquiry and meditation and psychedelics is ultimately to try to bring you back to that truth, to that present moment. Like every time I've taken had a really like deep breathwork session or psychedelics or anything like that, plant medicines, it always comes back down to this one truth, and it's always just be present. And it's always that simple. And it's, I guess I'm a slow learner. Like it's telling me the same thing.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily the slow learner. I think that's if you define that as truth, it's the only thing that you can continually learn and have to be continually told. I mean, I'm being on mushrooms and laying underneath a tree and looking up a tree, and this tree was just telling me that if I continue to go the way through my life that I'm going, that I'm going to miss the whole of my life because I'm so far ahead of my thoughts. And so like, what's next? What goal's next? What's achieved next? It's like you're going to go through life. You're going to look back on life and you're going to go, you missed everything because you're always trying to think of what was next to do. And it was like staring up at this tree, and it was just literally, I was just observing the bushes, the branches of the tree, just doing that, and it was just keeping me present. It was just keeping me present, and the message came through it. But it was like a profound moment for me that every time, similarly as you, I have to come back to that moment of just being present. I think that's I think it's the I guess a universal lesson that every human learns, and that's probably why it keeps popping up for you.
Yeah, and I think that's what breathwork is ultimately about: is bring yourself back to the breath, bring yourself back to the most present thing in your life, which is usually the breath. But yeah, like definitely, like before I got into breathwork, and I was going through that kind of depressed state. Just before that, I was like, I used to go out drinking, partying, and just binge drinking like 4 or 5 nights a week, like, and heavy drinking as well. And, back then it was fun. It was, but I was destroying my body, and it's kind of what led me to that depressed state. But in hindsight, what I realized after doing all this kind of like working on myself is all that drinking that I was doing wasn't because of the drinking. It's actually because I had social anxiety. And social anxiety was why I was drinking. And that drinking was to really, social lubricant, like just getting rid of that anxiety temporarily. And it just made so much sense when I realized that. It's like I didn't have an alcohol problem. I didn't have this kind of issue or that issue. It was anxiety. And ultimately under anxiety, it's like just not being present.
Yeah, I can completely relate to that. Looking back at my university days, and more so, the alcohol helped me to communicate how I felt better and what I wanted better, but also to mask what it was really like, the anxiety underneath, by allowing myself to have more fun and being less concerned about other people's opinions and things like that, which is a lesson that I've certainly come across as well, and had to delve deep into to doing the work to overcome that. And I think that's probably one of the catalysts, or one of the reasons to why I started a social media a few years ago, was because I just wanted to get over the concept of what people think of me, by just going online and just starting recording videos and just talking to, and anyone can see me. Like, anyone can see me and hear me and judge me, whatever, they can comment on it. But by doing that, it's allowed me to communicate a lot more effectively and be less socially like awkward, anxious, whatever the word you want to use. Again, by just going facing straight into the fear, rather than letting it consume you.
Yeah, for sure. Just like learning to lean into that stress, lean into that fear, and use the breathing to do that. And it's, I can't remember who said it, but I think it was like the cure for the pain is in the pain. I don't remember who said that directly, but we spend our whole lives trying to avoid discomfort, trying to avoid pain, suffering. But when because normally you're so distracted in normal life that you don't realize this. But when you're still for a moment and you're present, and even though there's so much beauty in this world, you realize that there's a lot of suffering, a lot of stress in daily life that we're not aware of. And it's just, the Buddhists say life is suffering, so it's there's stress everywhere, and it's just learning to acknowledge it, and acknowledge that it's always going to be there. It's never going away. And how do you work with it? Not work against it, but how do you work with it?
Yeah, I think there was a little clip from one of the Human Lab podcasts, and I think it was all about mindset and how to develop a positive mindset. And they framed stress in a way that, if you have, what causes stress for most people is having an expectation of an outcome that they want to reach, and then being concerned whether they're going to reach that outcome. And then people fear not being able to reach it, and often just don't go towards it. They allow the stress to create an avoidance behavior, which you just said, it's just avoiding the suffering of either needing to do the work or suffering from the fact that you can't do the work. But she was saying that if you can frame it in a way that it's excitement that you want to get a goal, then utilize the energy that you receive from the stress rather than allowing it to consume you, then you can change the way of the frame of that the fear, the stress is, rather than being avoidance, it's moving you towards reward. And I think that's what a lot of people need to train their ability to do in terms of utilizing stress. And I think it's Robert Sapolsky as well. He talks about stress in terms of it's just priming your body to move. Like, it's just energy. It's providing you with the energy. And we're so concerned about with the suffering and getting caught up in the suffering that we torment ourselves with the suffering rather than just doing the work and suffering through the work.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I think we're in a society now where there's just so much options, so much distraction, and so much like pills and things that is just ease our comfort straight away. When you have a bit of a pain, when you have a bit of anything, you go to the doctor and they just give you a pill straight away to just cover up that suffering, that pain, or whatever it is. But like pain and suffering and all these things, it's your mind, your body. It's trying to tell you something. It's like, hey Martin, hi Brian, like this, you got to look at this. There's something to look at here. And I think a lot of people, when they numb themselves with whatever they go through, and they don't really feel these things in their body, they're not aware of these things in their body, then they're not listening to the wisest thing, which is just their own intuition and their body. And I think that's one of the reasons why there's just so many people that are, unhealthy, sick, or, they're mentally not quite resilient or strong, I know that because I go through that myself. And it's just so easy, we just live in this time where it's so easy to access these kind of things but it's kind of like, Josh Waitzkin's, he had this book called Art of Learning. And I think he was like a chess prodigy. And then he became like a Tai Chi champion. And then he became like one of the first jiu-jitsu black belts in America under Marcelo Garcia. And through all these paths that he took, he realized that the path of learning is the same for everything. And then once you understand that path, that initial resistance and struggle, and then it gets a bit easier and easier and easier. And it's the same for everything. And when you realize that, and when you realize it's the same kind of template, the same kind of path for any sort of path to mastery, whatever discipline it is, then you accept that discomfort as part of the process. Like when you go to the gym and you work out, it's going to burn, it's going to kind of hurt a bit. But the result is you're going to rest, recover, eat, and then you're going to grow back stronger and bigger. And it's worth investment. Whereas a lot of people, I think, at the first sign of discomfort or pain, they shy away and they don't really know that that's temporary. That initial hump is temporary, and it gets better and better and better. Yeah. And it's just, people I think they just don't really realize that, and they just try to avoid that discomfort, which is completely normal.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it's the embarrassment factor for some people. For me, I struggle with not being a master almost immediately. So I went out surfing the other day, and I've only surfed maybe 4 or 5 times, and I couldn't get on the board once. And it was just a pain for me, and it's made me just go, I don't want to ever do it again, because I just wasn't able to do it. Like it's that fear of failure, and relating the outcome of that to your identity of that you're a failure, when not realizing that everyone has to be the fool before they can be the master. So everyone's got to look like an idiot before they can achieve something there. And I also liken it to Newton's first law of motion. It's like the moment of inertia, it takes up the most energy. It's like to actually get moving, if you're to try and push a boulder, like to actually get that moving takes more energy than it does once it's got momentum. Once you're in that momentum, it's that flow, and you're able to move, and you can that's where you start to see the progress. But getting started takes the most courage and most strength.
Yeah, 100%.
So couple of questions. I want to know what the biggest impacts that you're seeing in the people that you've been taken through breath work. Obviously, you've taken breath work from your learning into a place where no one was doing it. What's the biggest impact that it's been having on people over in Hong Kong?
The biggest impact, I would say it's kind of shifted over time, because at the beginning it was attracting a certain group of people, like high performers that were really in tune with what was going on in the world, like people with PTs, or people like physios, and people that really because at that time when I started, no one really knew who Wim Hof was, only a handful knew. So it started like that, and that was more performance related. But then as time went by, I started noticing that as more and more people came just because they were dealing with health issues, or like mental health issues, anxiety, stress, burnout, depression, even people with suicidal thoughts and stuff like that. And I started kind of to I started noticing it more, kind of going towards the mental health side. And like, it's just like a little quick part of the story of mine, why I started teaching is I kind of gave up on teaching after I got certified by Wim Hof, just because of that fear of public speaking. And I had mentally kind of given up. I was like, okay, I'm going to just practice for myself. I'm not going to go out and teach. You know, there's probably better people out there to teach than I am. And then I flew back to Hong Kong, and I was literally landed that night. The next morning, I went out to have lunch with a few family members. And as I was walking back from lunch, I was walking through a shopping mall to get back to my home. And as I just was walking through it at that particular time. And at that moment, I was walking through the mall. This woman jumped off the top, and she landed like, I would say maybe 10 meters away from me. And I mean, it was quite traumatizing, obviously, and it took me a while to get through it. And breath really helped me get through that. So did ayahuasca. But in that moment, like not in that moment, but like, you know, after I kind of like processed it, I kind of just saw it as a kick in the butt. You know, whether there was any meaning to it or not, it doesn't really matter, to be honest. Yeah. But to me, it meant something to me in terms of like, it was showing me that, you know, there's people that are suffering from mental health, you know, in Hong Kong. And the whole Wim Hof story is his wife committed suicide because of similar circumstances. And to me, it's just kind of like a kind of a catalyst for me to actually go out there and teach. And that's when, I guess when you have like a goal that's kind of bigger than yourself, then you don't care about the fear anymore, even though you still have that fear. And I guess that's when I started, you know, really kind of approaching everyone in Hong Kong. I remember I reached out to about 60 places, 70 different places in Hong Kong, and I only had maybe like 3 replies. And that was in 2017, I think. And then, it's just been growing since. And just before I left Hong Kong, I started working with children in the schools there. And like my aim going forward, if I'm able to go back to Hong Kong, or when I'm able to go back to Hong Kong, is really just to focus on the younger generation and be able to give these tools. I want to get into all the schools basically in Hong Kong is my next kind of thing. And the reason is just, probably you understand this as well, is growing up in Australia back then, I had a lot of allergies. So I was mouth breathing after a certain age a lot. And there was a distinct period of my life as a kid where I went from this really confident kid, really confident, really playful kind of kid, to really anxious and shy and insecure. And looking back in hindsight, I think that's when I started mouth breathing. Okay. I went from nasal breathing to mouth breathing. Yeah. And I just always had this this level of anxiety through my childhood and up, you know, not even way past my childhood, all the way up to, you know, university and past university, you know, past my first job and stuff. And it's like everything kind of came full circle when I realized that all these issues that I've had in my life started because of not breathing optimally. And everything's kind of makes sense. And I want to be able to give the same tools back to these kids. Because I think it's important. Yeah. Important that
I think preteen, early teens is a very crucial area for majority of people to understand that they can regulate their emotions, because there's a period where emotions all of a sudden, because the hormones go all over the place, right? So obviously as a young child, you need to learn how to regulate yourself. But as a teenager, I think it's important growing through those phases and to take that into adulthood, that you can actually, you've got this thing here that you can use to calm yourself, you know, to relax yourself, to go introspective and actually just take a moment of break just to say, hey, am I okay? What's going on? And to start just to develop those questions. I think that's going to be crucial going forward, especially with the way the world has gone, where it's so fast. Things are changing so rapidly. Kids have access to so much information that it's great in one way for education and learning, and you know, they're smart and they can use technology, but it also is it's an issue in terms of like they can see everything that's going on in the world, and they can judge themselves to people all over the world, and 7 billion people, and they can judge themselves to half of them through the internet. It's a wild ride that teenagers are going through. And I think it's valuable for them to understand their body and their physiology.
Yeah, I think we definitely, at least me anyway, I was born in the 80s, so I was on that cusp of that analog and digital kind of side. And yeah, it's so different now, and I can't really imagine what it's like growing up a kid in today's age. Like, I think it was Navala was saying, like, like at least my era growing up, like, it was hard. It was, you wanted to go out and find more information, your information sources were limited. But now as a kid, like, it's over. It's like you have everything. And it's learning to pick and choose and be selective with what information you do let in. Because it's the opposite now. It's kind of overstimulus, over just everything in abundance. And definitely, if you don't have your bearings, you don't have your fundamentals, then you can easily be kind of, taken all over the place. And, I've definitely been in that space as well. Like, even just now with everything that's going on with the pandemic, you look at social media and, the algorithms and stuff, it feeds you what you look at. It feeds you what you want to see. And it just really polarizes. It puts people into their echo chambers and filter bubbles. And you could have, like, a friend or neighbor or whatever that, you live in the same area, you do go to the same job and stuff, but have a completely different mindset and completely different perception of how the world is based off what the algorithm is showing you in Instagram and Facebook. And, and it's there's just so much divide now, and yes, it's just causing more and more. Yeah. Sorry, I forgot what the actual point was.
So you said that you left, obviously you left Hong Kong. Was that like an all of a sudden out of the nowhere thing? Because I think I was chatting we're sending a message to you on social media, wanting to have a chat with you on this podcast. And you said, I'm going to Europe. And then all of a sudden, like, you had to put a message out to people to say that you were leaving Hong Kong. And was that just like a spur of the moment call to adventure to go over to do the breathwork mastery?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, it was. I had trained with Kasper just before the pandemic started, like, I think in the beginning of 2020. So I already trained with Kasper, and yeah, I mean, this was there available, and something in me told me just to go, even though there's so much, the travel restrictions, it's pretty crazy and everything like that, and but just something told me just to go, and I just went, and I didn't really. How was it? I always. It was amazing. Like, it's amazing because do you know much about Kasper?
I don't. I follow him on social media. I've followed him for a little while. I've seen he's been doing his classes, and it looks like the sort of classes that are really good for bringing a group together to have an experience as a group, to connect with people as well as learn skills. Like, it looks promising.
Yeah, 100%. Kasper is amazing. He was, I think, one of the main guys of Wim Hof. Like, he was one of the first guys with a science background with Wim Hof. And once Wim found that out, he basically got Kasper to teach all the instructors. So Kasper, I think, trained like probably the bulk of the majority Wim Hof instructors for the first several years at least. So leading all the expeditions and just guiding thousands and thousands of people. And but yeah, when I started learning from him, it's the kind of style that he teaches and how he is as a person. It really resonates with me. And I'm very similar in a certain way. He has that, on the surface, it has that kind of science kind of side, that practical kind of side to him. But then when you get to know him in person, he's a very spiritual kind of guy. He's very, he's very on that side of things. So is it kind of a balance of both sides, which is what I really like about him. But in terms of his knowledge, in terms of what he knows about breathwork, he's definitely up there with the best, for sure. With Dr. Glisser and Brian McKenzie, he's definitely up there with those guys, for sure. But in terms of him as a person, I guess when you choose a teacher these days, like, for me anyway, like, I don't pick him based just on the credentials, but on them themselves, like how I feel towards this person and do I resonate with them. And yeah, like, I trained with Kasper a couple of years ago, and just seeing in these last 2 years, he himself has grown a lot, and it's just it's just inspiring to have someone that you're following, and teacher that you're learning from, that doesn't stop evolving himself and keeps getting getting better and better and better. And it's 2 years ago when I learned from him, he was very like kind of practical stuff. This time going back, it's like you said, exactly like what you said. It was much more kind of ceremonial. It was much more kind of like a a setting of like an ayahuasca ceremony, you know, like where people would go there. Like we were still learning all this stuff about all the science about breathing and stuff, but a lot of it was personal growth as well.
Yeah,
a lot of it was just, you know, because for me personally, like as a coach, it's a lot of the things that help you become a good coach. A lot of it, I find, it's not the data. It's not all the books and stuff, but it's a lot of other things, you know, how you can relate to people, you know, how you feel your energy, you know, like your message and all those kind of things. And that's the kind of side that I really want to learn from Kasper, is that side of it. And also like the business side of it too. You know, there's doing breath work. You obviously, you know, you want to be able to have it as a sustainable source of income. So you can do this kind of mission of yours or this passion of yours without having to worry about those kind of things. So yeah, it's kind of a full spectrum kind of thing that Kasper provides, and yeah, highly recommend it. And I can't speak highly enough of Kasper.
That's amazing. What would you say that a couple of your key takeaways were from that event?
The key takeaways were really more personal things. It was actually very similar to the Wim Hof, first retreat Wim Hof, where my biggest lessons were more about myself. And it was actually the same lesson, but it was just kind of a bit further, like a bit more evolved. But the main lesson I learned from the first Wim Hof retreat was like that I am the person standing in my own way. Like there's no one else. It's just me. And this retreat with Kasper, it kind of brought it back full circle with that. It just reminded me again that all the fear and all the insecurities and all those things, that resistance and things are holding myself back in life, that's me. You know, there's no one else to blame. It's purely my responsibility. And just to kind of snap out of that victim mindset, that victim mentality, and just really take responsibility for your life. And, you know, and I don't care about what people think. You know, if you know what you're doing, if you believe what you're doing is right and it's, you know, hurting anyone, just go for it and just do it, you know. And that's something I'm still learning. You know, it's definitely something that's still a work in progress for me.
I think it's a continual work. I don't think there's ever a point where even people like Tony Robbins, I don't think it ever gets to a point where it's just like, oh, I've got to get on a stage in front of 15,000 people. Like it's still going to be some, but it's that training and the knuckling down and the grinding of the mindset to go, you're going to do it regardless anyway, because it's your purpose, or it's your, it's your mission, or whatever you want to call it. If you want to give it your gift or whatever, it's once you don't make it about you. I had a really interesting conversation with one of my friends maybe about a month ago, and I was like, look, I'm wanting to find more clients that I can help. Now, the sort of people that I want to be working with is people who do want to be at the top of their game. They want, they're highly stressed individuals that maybe I can just teach them some small techniques that can help lower their stress levels so they're a bit more focused and have more clarity, more energy. But like, where can I actively find those people? And he was like, they're all on LinkedIn. And I'm like, yeah, but how do you start a conversation on LinkedIn and, you know, explain what you're going to do and stuff like that? And it's like, I just concerned that they're going to be like, who's this guy? And his answer was really intriguing, because it wasn't like, oh, you've just got to do it. He just went, why are you so selfish? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, why is it about you? I was like, why is it about how you feel and not you looking at what you can do for them? It's like, you stepping up and stepping over that fear is not about you. It's not about your, you know, how you feel. It's about, I thought it was about how they feel and making them better. It's like, all you're doing is making it about you again. I was like, huh, that's interesting. Yeah. It's like, that's very self-centered to not be able to start a conversation with someone because of how you feel when you know that you can help them. Isn't it your duty or your responsibility to make that conversation with that person?
Yeah, 100%. And I definitely, I've been definitely more aware of that state. And, you know, I go through cycles of, you know, good like ups and downs in my mood and my state and stuff. And what I notice is when I'm going through like a lower period, and like energetically, is usually when I'm too in my own head and I'm too focused on myself. And like I have the same kind of mindset sometimes where I'm thinking like, oh, what are they going to think about me? That kind of seeking approval kind of thing. And then it just kind of like, it just spirals, and you just stretch yourself out more and more and more. And you make up even more of these stories and this and that. And you start to question your whole life and everything. And, but yeah, like when you I think when you focus on the mission and what you're able to provide and add value to other people's lives and the world, then yeah, when you have something that's greater than your own ego, greater than yourself, I find that's the way to go in at least in what we're doing. I find that every time I think about me and I focus on myself, I start to get really insecure, and I start to the stories start to play in my head, and it's not
shift
good.
Shift your focus away from you onto the result you want to get for someone else or the result you want to get in general.
Exactly.
Cool. So a couple more questions before we finish up. I guess number one is, what's next for you? I was on your website earlier and it said coming soon on the one-to-one coaching. I don't know how long that's been there for, but what's
not that very up to date.
Yeah. What's next for you?
I actually, I kind of decided yesterday that I'm going to do this, because as I said, I had really no clue what I was going to do, or whether I'm going to stay in Australia or just kind of wait, and see what happens with Hong Kong. And I don't want to be in that place where I'm just really not sure what's going on. So I've always wanted to go to India, go to like an ashram and just learn under like a master, like a yogi master, or a monk or something. And I think that's what I'm going to do. So, India, and I checked everything. India's open right now for travel, no restrictions. So I think for me, that feels right. That feels like the next step for me. And I think I'm just going to go to India and see where that takes me.
I'm super excited for you. That's going to be one hell of a journey.
I'm sure it is. I have no expectations, but it's just something in my gut or my heart is kind of pulling me towards that. And like we talked about before, just kind of just follow it, just go with the flow.
Go with it. Nice. Cool. Okay. So final question. What advice would you give to anyone that's starting out on their breathwork journey?
As a coach or as just anyone?
You can choose as if someone is getting into breathwork to, I guess, experience the positives of it. So if you were the coach and they were getting into breathwork as they were starting their journey.
Mm-hmm. I would say that firstly, like, do it, try it. Breathing is, it is literally the remote control to our state. It's something that before you kind of really understand what breathwork is, before you really kind of try it yourself, you don't understand how much control and power that you have over your own internal state. That you're not, you don't just helpless to those states of there's low states or states of depression or states of anxiety and stuff. And there are tools out there that you can use to regulate your own state. And one of the best tools I found, one of the fastest tools I found and most powerful is the breath. And just based off that alone and the change that I've seen in myself and other people, it's really like there's nothing to lose. It's breathing, it's free. Just try it. If it doesn't quite click with you, it doesn't quite work, then for you, then, at least you tried it. But, just try it. It's an absolute game changer.
It is. It's free. And once you learn through your own experience, it's a tool you then have for your life, for going through the rest of your life to change your state, which is amazing. All right. Thank you very much, Brian. It's been good to have a chat with you and to delve a bit deeper into getting to know you. So final question, if people just want to follow you, reach out to you to hear more of what you're doing and follow your journey over to India, how can they contact you?
Probably by email or Instagram. So it's Primal Breathwork, just one word, or email is Brian at bw.com. So right now I'm not really teaching too much classes while I'm kind of traveling and learning, but I am still doing like one-on-one clients. So I'm still open to that. I'm still doing that with my clients from Hong Kong and in Asia and stuff. So right now, yeah, hopefully I do end up going to India, and that will be definitely an interesting journey.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And thanks to everyone for listening.
Thanks, Martin. Have a great day, guys.